Secondly, the program after that on December 6th will be one of our program committee's Friday surprises. These slots are reserved for topics of current interest in the community, the so-called hot topics, and I'm pleased to be able to unveil that surprise for you today. Our speaker 2 weeks from today will be Julie Mancini, who is the director of Portland Arts and Lectures, as many of you know, and she will be talking about the rapid rise of Portland as both a magnet and a mecca for writers to the Northwest region. Our board host today, seated at the end of head table, is Greg McPherson. Greg is the chair of our research board, a member of the Board of Governors, and a member of the law firm of Stoll Reeves here in Portland. Greg will have the privilege of asking the first question. After Greg's question, we'll open the microphone in the center of the room to questions from members of City Club in the audience, and I would ask you to please line up behind that microphone in front of the podium even before Greg has asked the question so that everyone gets a chance to address our panel, but please keep those questions short, no longer than 30 seconds. We're here today to learn more about what I characterized last week as one of Oregon's most invigorating industries, but which is now being billed as Oregon's invisible enterprise. I'm curious, how many of you in the room have run across the filming or a film project, either downtown or in your neighborhoods? Can I see a quick show of hands? For our radio audience, I would venture that that's about 95% of the people in the room. So for an economic development activity which has generated $100 million for Oregon's economy in the last year, it should have an imposing edifice, right? Or at least it should have maybe a viewable from the air logo on one of the most prominent hillsides in town, or maybe even a town dedicated to its headquarters. Well, with us today are several of our local moguls from film, video, and multimedia land, and moderating our panel is Mary McDonald-Lewis, Oregon correspondent and part-time editor for Media Inc. She specializes in business reporting on film, video, radio, multimedia, and advertising, and she also works as a voice actress in the Northwest and in Los Angeles. In her spare time, she serves on the boards of AFTRA, that's AFTRA, which she explains to me is the Actors Union. I keep on saying ATRA, which is something entirely else, as you know. The Portland Creative Conference, and is halfway through graduate school, getting her BFA in both theater arts and directing at the University of Portland. Not new to the classroom, Mary is a university-level English and theater arts instructor with 15 years at the head of the class at college-level classes. Ms. McDonald-Lewis has also been a freelance writer for 14 years and a journalist, both print and broadcast, for 7 years. Most recently, she's become a director on commercial and theatrical projects here in the Northwest. She's currently directing Don Faustino for the Miracle Theater and plans to continue her stage work in this arena. If Mary can handle all of that, she can manage our formidable cast on our panel today, which I will now turn the podium over to her to introduce. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you. And as Chris said, my name is Mary McDonald-Lewis. It's a pleasure to be with you here today and also on OPB. As you may have gathered, I bring sort of an interesting perspective to this panel's conversation with you today. It's a dual one, if you like. As a journalist for Media Inc., which, as Chris explained, is a media marketing paper here in the Pacific Northwest, I report on the business side of the industries from the outside looking in, as is proper for a good journalist. But I also work on the inside as a voice actress, putting my pipes to work on film work, TV and radio commercials, CD-ROM, and internet projects. And I hope this dual view will help you see what I see when I observe what I call Oregon's multi-million-dollar invisible enterprise, a phrase that I believe has been coined here today. That is this state's film, TV, advertising, and multimedia business. I'm delighted to have this particular panel join us today. This is the A-list, ladies and gentlemen. They are key players in the industry that you're going to be hearing about today, and we're lucky to have them all with us. Let me introduce you to our panel now. Immediately to my left is Chris Cusick, the president of Cusicks Talent Agency. Next to Chris is Bob Landcaster, CEO of Alpha Cine, based here in Portland and also in Seattle. David Woolson sits next to Bob. David is the executive director of the state's Oregon Film and Viceo Office. And finally, we have Mathew Tombers, who joins us from Eugene today. Mathew is the Executive Vice President of Chambers Communications. He is the Executive VP of Chambers Production Corps, managing the creative there. Let's open up the discussion to the panel now. I'd like to start with David. David, would you please educate us, give us a time-lapse overview, if you can, of Oregon's film and video industry, and tell us what role your office plays today.
Well, the Oregon Film and Viceo Office is a state agency with a mission of promoting and marketing Oregon as a film location to Hollywood, but also on an international basis. What we do is a very competitive enterprise. We compete on a daily basis with 240 film commissions worldwide that are all trying to attract the $3 billion a year that Hollywood spends on location. So it is fiercely competitive in terms of being a more traditional film, commission. But what we've also tried to do is build the industry from the inside out in traditional film and video areas as well as in multimedia. But first and foremost, we work in terms of marketing, recruiting, as well as serving as a liaison to production companies looking at shooting in Oregon. Kind of a quick overview of the industry is that while large feature films, movie stars, all that seems to get more attention, the industry in Oregon is much more than that. Again, it has been home to a number of feature films over the years. Mr. Holland's Opus, which Richard Dreyfuss won or was nominated for an Academy Award more recently. Television series for network television, including Nowhere Man, which was on United Paramount Network, Under Suspicion on CBS, McKenna, which was on ABC, are all shows in recent years. Commercials are a very important part of the business. Car commercials, for example, are a very, last year brought in about $6 million in revenue into the state. But beyond that, it's not just Hollywood coming to town. Oregon has its own thriving, permanently based businesses and industries, from production companies and producers to a number of businesses related that are represented on this panel. And so it is a very broad-based industry in terms that is here full-time 52 weeks a year. Oregon has a very long, colorful film history dating back to 1915 to Where Cowboy is King, which was a documentary about the Pendleton Roundup. And through the years, films such as The Big Trail with John Wayne in 1930 were filmed here, The General with Buster Keaton in 1928, Sometimes a Great Notion in 1970, Paint Your Wagon in 1968, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which won Best Picture in 1976, Kindergarten Cop in 1990, and through the years. So it has been a long history. This is not a new development in Oregon, but there's some very exciting opportunities as it relates to digital media and multimedia, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a bit, that also, I think, gives us, I think, a glimpse that the future is quite bright in Oregon with this industry as well.
Very good. Thanks, David. Bob, question for you. Tell us a little bit about what your business does, Alpha Cine. What do you provide for the local and imported film, video, advertising industries? And can you tell us also a little bit about the national and international scope of your business?
Alpha Cine is a motion picture lab and transfer facility with offices in both Portland and Seattle. What we do is we serve the production and the post-production communities in advertising, commercials, and in film. Basically, production includes the planning, the filming, and the processing of the project. Post-production includes the editing, sound mixing, transfer to distribution medium, whether that be a film finish or whether that be a video finish. Alpha Cine processes the film. By processing, I mean it develops it, just like your photomat would develop it. We also mix the sound for the project. We transfer the film to video, and we create the final film prints for theatrical release. We're the only company of our kind in the state of Oregon right now. A project that originates on film is probably better looking than a project that originates on video. Film has resolution of over 3,500 lines versus 300 lines of resolution for broadcast TV. VHS is slightly better. Laserdisc is around 700 or so. The higher the resolution, the better the picture, period. You get more depth, you get more detail, you get more warmth with film. It transfers very well to video, so long as the origination is from film. Compare, if you will, a soap opera that you might see during the day to a primetime television show. There is no difference. The film looks better. In addition, film is a superior archival format over video. Film can last up to 100 years if it's stored properly. Video, maybe 10 years, best case scenario. Some of our representative clients include locally here, Will Vinton Studios, Nike, the Oregon Lottery, local national and ad agencies, multimedia producers for CD-ROM games, indigenous filmmakers, some of them very strongly recognized, like Joan Gratz, who won an Academy Award 2 years ago for Mona Lisa Descending a Staircase. National filmmakers, Warner Brothers, 20th Century Fox, MGM. More recently, Patrick Kaufman, which did a movie of the week entitled Payback, starring Mary Tyler Moore and Ed Asner. Wilshire Court, and of course, Gus Van Sant, local producer and director of movies such as Drugstore Cowboy, My Own Private Idaho, and more recently, To Die For.
Good, thanks. Terrific overview. To Mathew, I see a beautiful architectural rendering at the back of the room I'd like you to tell us a little bit more about as you talk about your business, Chambers Communications. Give us a little background on Chambers and tell us about the foundation you're laying now for a private soundstage, and specifically what the decision to build that soundstage indicates about your vision for the future of the industry here.
A couple of things, one of which is we talked about film and video and multimedia as being the invisible industry in Oregon, and what I think we're doing is giving it a more visible face, in that we broke ground about 12 weeks ago for what will be an over 100,000 square foot production facility on Chad Drive in Eugene. I was over there on Wednesday, and they're pouring concrete and getting ready to put up structural beams, and we will have two 14,000 square foot sound stages. In total, there'll be about 35,000 square feet, 37,000 square feet of studio space in the facility. It is a testament to our belief that there is a strong film and video and multimedia business here in the Pacific Northwest. It also fits in with the fact that the whole industry has been changing over the last 15 years. I was saying to someone yesterday that if 15 years ago somebody had said to you Atlanta would be one of the world centers of television, people would have laughed, and they did laugh. But the reality is that the whole paradigm of the business is changing, in that we believe that we can do a couple of things, one of which is that with our facility we can attract productions from Hollywood to come up here and shoot and use our facilities. In fact, Warner Brothers did a Prefontaine, a film in Eugene this summer, and they would have stayed longer had the facility already been built, because they had to go down and do some of their shooting in Los Angeles because they couldn't find a facility that was large enough. But more than just being a facilities business, we also believe that, and we talked that next week there's going to be, or the next time there's going to be a discussion about the writers. There is a tremendous creative community here in Oregon and in the Pacific Northwest, and what we would like to do is be a studio not just in the physical sense, but also in the sense of being a place where creative content can come together, be developed, and then created and generated and then sold through to the people in Atlanta and Washington and New York and Los Angeles. I think the whole industry is changing. I do a lot of work with the Academy of Television Arts and Sciences in Los Angeles, and the television community and the film communities are struggling with the fact that we are living in one of the greatest periods of change in the history of media. And with change, there comes lots of opportunities, and I believe that building our facility is our belief in that this is an opportunity for us and for the state of Oregon. Chambers is interesting in that it has ABC affiliates. It also owns cable systems. We have an opportunity to interface with the media business in ways that lots of other companies don't have an opportunity to do. Right now, we are in production of over 30 hours of programming for various cable networks and for syndication. I don't know that there's anybody else in Oregon that's doing quite as much as we are. I am relatively new to Oregon. I've only been here about 10 months. And I really believe that the whole Pacific Northwest and Oregon in particular and Eugene specifically have a great future in the media business.
Good. Thanks very much. Now to you, Chris. For another somewhat historical overview, as the longtime owner of Portland's biggest talent agency, you've seen tremendous change in the local industry, including the talent pool with regard to professionalism. Could you please talk about that and tell us what that means for local and imported companies who work here and rely on talent?
Well, we started our business in 1980, and it was a school and an agency. And from that, in 1988, we spun into the business Cusicks Talent Agency, and I no longer own the school several years ago. But since 1988 to throughout, figures you're all business people, our first month of billing was like $3,000. We now bill over $1 million a year in anywhere from fashion to film, television, voiceovers. We started with 6 in 1988. We started with 6 voiceover talent and 25 models. And now we have 65 voiceover talent and probably 100 models, 200 on-camera theatrical actors, some of whom are also voiceover talent. Some people do everything. We represent makeup artists, one of whom is the biggest billing person we have in our agency. And we have 4 stand-up comedians and 2 jugglers and 1 rodeo clown. So we've really come a long way. And some screenwriters. So we've become very diverse, and it's been a lot of fun doing that. The talent pool is our local people who have been here all of their lives to people who have, like Mary McDonald-Lewis. We were blessed with her. She moved here from Los Angeles. We have people who have moved from New York. We have people who have moved away from Portland and now have come home. Like Gretchen Corbett, for an example. You all don't know the name Corbett. She had a wonderful review on her theater just last week. And she's home after many years and done a beautiful job in LA. We place models all over the world. We are like everyone else here, deal with everyone in the world, which is really fun, starting from our meager $3,000 a month. We also have, the same clients that Bob has, we have. We just work, we're suppliers, we supply them with the talent that they need. And we have some of our clients are production people. Tai, we have watched start their business in 1987, also spun from another business. They have become one of the largest producers of infomercials in the country, and I won't quote any figures for them, but they're a wonderful client of ours. Creative Media Development has become a huge production facility. They also do a lot of CD-ROM interactive things that are very, very new to us and to the marketplace, and in the future will become, huge business for our state. Advertising agencies, obviously, Wyden and Kennedy, and some of their clients are Coke and Nike and Microsoft, ESPN, and Oregon Tourism. And they do a fabulous job. They're also a big client of ours. Manufacturers, Janssen, Avia, again, Nike, Pendleton, Columbia Sportswear, Duffel. Independent films have become something that is really wonderful in Oregon, and started with Gus Van Sant and has given other people courage to do the same thing. We have lots of retailers that support us. Meyer & Frank's, Nordstrom's, Fred Meyer, Emporium, to all of you recognize them. They're wonderful clients that we have for print and on-camera work. So there you go.
Good. Thank you, Chris. Leave it to the agent to go on. It's her business to sell, and by God, she does it well. And Chris opened a very important door, the door that leads to greater knowledge about the economic impact of our invisible enterprise. And for more information on that, I'd like to turn to David. Could you speak directly to the economic impact of the film video, and now our new multimedia industry here, as well as advertising in Oregon.
Yeah, I think that it's important, and one of the main messages, really, I guess, for today that I would want to leave with you is the perception versus reality about the film and television business. It is a tough, sophisticated, global business. And so behind the smoke and mirrors, and because it is associated with the business of entertaining people, make no bones about it, it is very much about high finance and high risk, high reward, and it is a very sophisticated business. It is big business for the United States. The film, television, entertainment industries are the second net export for the United States, second only behind aerospace. Again, Hollywood spends $3 billion a year on location. Your average feature film costs $38 million to produce, another $20 million to promote. But it's also big business for Oregon. Over the last 6 years, Oregon has received revenues in excess of $215 million, direct dollars, from out-of-state producers coming to shoot feature films, television, as well as commercial work. But again, I come back to it is not just Hollywood. Last year, the small Oregon businesses, for the most part, contributed an additional $84 million into Oregon's economy. So it is very much about business. The average industry wage job for the film and video industry is about $31,000 a year, which is $6,000 a year higher than the average manufacturing wage in Oregon. And I think that when you look at, in terms of our office with what we do, over the 6 years that, as I mentioned, there's been about $215 million worth of revenue. Over that time, there's been a state investment in our office of about $2 million, which translates to about 100-to-1 return on investment, which we basically pay for ourselves about 5-to-1 in terms of bottom line tax revenue into the state treasury. In addition, I would say that in terms of the hard cash, high-paying jobs, it is a tremendous promotional vehicle for the state. Take, again, I mentioned Mr. Holland's Opus, but it is set in Oregon. It was written, for the story to take place here. It was on 2,000 theaters nationwide. It was then on video cassette. It will be on free television. It will be promoted on a worldwide basis behind a $25 million ad campaign. So there's truly money promotion that you cannot buy otherwise. One good example of that is that when Kindergarten Cop shot in Astoria in '91, the previous January, the Convention Visitors Bureau in Astoria received 15 calls that month, dead as a doornail, for the month of January in Astoria. The next December, Kindergarten Cop is released as a Christmas release. The following January, they had 585 inquiries into the office. 3 guesses and 2 don't count. What happened?
Thanks very much, David. Now, Chris, go back, please, to your 8th grade algebra for me. I've got some math questions for you. Tell us a little bit about numbers. How many SAG and AFTRA, and as Chris explained, those are union actors, are there here in Oregon, and in Portland specifically? And are they able to make a living here without having to leave the state? Also, please give us a ballpark figure for our non-union actors in the area. Tell us how many other kinds of professionals are employed by the business, makeup artists, such as you mentioned, and others. And also, beyond their professional work, would you say that these people enrich Portland in other ways, and how do you imagine that is? This sounds like a question that begins with 2 trains leave Chicago at the same time. I know, but do your best.
I had to make copious notes on this question. I got some of my figures from American Federation of Television and Radio Artists. The office gave me some figures. There are 525 actors who are with AFTRA and 520 who are with SAG, Screen Actors Guild. And there are 150 with Equity, which is the theater union. But that boils down to maybe there are 800 actors in the state who are union, because some are both. We guess that maybe there are 650 union actors in Portland alone. And I don't know how many non-union actors there are. We handle about 90% of our actors are union. And the reason they become union is that they do 2 jobs and then they belong to the union, so that once they start working, they become union members, which is great for them. You have to understand that most of these people are part-time actors, part-time voiceover, part-time, theater people, etc. They have other jobs. I wrote down some figures, and these are probably 1% of the group who make this much money. But yes, there are people who can make a living here at their profession of being an actor. Our top money maker, who works on an average of 3 days a week, makes about $50,000 a year. A voiceover talent will go for a 1 or 2 hour booking, and our top voiceover person makes $32,000. Very, very part-time. That's like 1 day a week for a couple of hours. Our top model made about $40,000 last year, working 2 full days a week. We had, for an example, we have 2 young boys last year who did Dead by Sunset. They were 2 little co-stars, and they each made over $20,000. But that was the only job they had. It took them 6 weeks to make that, to earn that. But then they don't work again for another 6 months or so, and that kind of money only comes along for them occasionally in this marketplace. So it's very sporadic for most people. So these figures sound wonderful. Everybody wants to rush out and become one of these guys, but these are just very few. And as far as enriching our Portland, Oregon, Mary McDonald-Lewis is a very good example, someone who is an artist, a teacher, a writer, a voice actor, and we represent we represent an anesthesiologist. We have 3 models who are getting their masters in psychology. There are business owners that you all know, I won't mention any names, TV personalities, radio DJs, writers, artists, grocery clerks, teachers, producers, stockbrokers, secretaries, and waiters.
But they all want to direct.
And they all want to direct.
Thank you. To Mathew, talk to us, please, about your staff down there at Chambers. How many people are employed there now, or work as independent contractors? And what work will a functioning soundstage provide for these and others? As well, do you have a trained population you're going to be able to pull from for that soundstage?
A couple of things, one of which is in Chambers Communications, which includes the broadcast affiliates, the cable side, there are over 300 employees. I don't know exactly. Within Chambers production right now, we have about 15 people who are either full-time or are on staff with us as freelancers as we're working on individual projects. As we open the studio, we will have a significant increase in people as we have project work there, and it will often be project work because television, as I think Chris was saying, tends to be project-driven, film and television. One of the things that we are in conversation with is some people who are developing some Oregon-based projects which would hopefully be in series television, which could live within the studio on an ongoing basis, and so that would create some of the best possible opportunities for staff. I think that one of the things that we are facing is that we do need to have a trained staff in Oregon, but also we do have some wonderful talent here. Specifically in the Portland area, there are tremendous talents. Peter Dunn, who is the producer of Nowhere Man, has raved to me about the quality of the people that he worked with here in Oregon as on a par with or better than people that he's worked with in any other part of the country. In Eugene, we will be able to draw on the people who are here in Portland, and also there are people who are moving to Central Oregon who have wonderful backgrounds. We've just finished a 1-hour special for syndication where we've drawn on some people who have very rich backgrounds from California and New York who have made a lifestyle decision to live in Central Oregon. In addition to that, we are working, Jack Lawrence, who is the Executive Vice President of Chambers Communications, is working with the University of Oregon, helping setting up a training program through the University of Oregon in multimedia. If everything is approved, the first degrees in multimedia will be granted in 1997. We'll begin to offer them in the fall of 1997. We are working with Lane Community College, developing a program to train people in below-the-line crafts, people who are sound technicians, lighting technicians, things like that. We are working to develop a skill set among people who are residents of Southern and Central Oregon.
Good, thanks very much. Finally to Bob, you came from the industry from some very interesting non-related fields not very long ago. So you bring a kind of a fresh perspective to the business. How healthy is Oregon's film and video industry as a business, not as a sexy Hollywood-based industry, but as a bottom-line business?
Well, originally I was in banking, and I guess on a macro basis, I'd have to say the industry is in fair health. Not great, but not poor. On a micro basis, the industry varies greatly. Some of the local production companies truly have a license to just print money. Other production companies have great artistic and creative abilities, but have very little management abilities. You know, this is fairly true with any industry you look at. You have some good and bad, and there's really no difference between that and the film and video industry here. More and more, as David said, the industry is becoming business-driven as opposed to creatively driven. In the past, creativity was the big thing. Now profits are the major thing. I go down to Los Angeles quite a bit, and I see a lot of the major studios acting as a business now as opposed to a studio, and I see that constantly. Acquisitions, layoffs, profit-oriented projects are now becoming the norm rather than the exception. Many people in the industry say the accountants are now controlling the studios. This isn't really true, but the analogy is still there. Basically, entertainment has become big business. I think now it's the second biggest industry in the state of California, second only to agriculture. We see some of the same profit-driven opportunities here in Oregon as are in California. And I'm not suggesting that we should turn into another California here. Oregon has a lot to offer the industry, but I think the industry has a lot to offer Oregon. The multimedia industry here in the state of Oregon is growing at a phenomenal rate. Many of these companies will continue to grow and flourish. Unfortunately, many of them will probably wither and die. I think that we're fairly lucky in Oregon. We have a very high level of service. We have a very high level of employee base that we can draw from. The only drawback in our industry right here in Oregon is that the crews are not quite as deep. The services are not quite as deep as they are in Los Angeles or in Vancouver, British Columbia. To have growth in this industry, particularly in the production side, this state needs a very large soundstage for film production. It is probably going to have to be subsidized by the state. This is not unique. Many states subsidize sound stages. In fact, many Canadian provinces subsidize sound stages, or at least start out by subsidizing it until the industry grows stronger. You know, David was talking about before about his ROI. Well, in banking, that's all I used to deal with is ROEs and ROIs and working capital and ratios and the like. And an ROI of 100 to 1 is something that most bankers would be quite envious over.
Very good, thanks. That's good news. We're going to move on to Double Jeopardy. I have a final question for each of you. It's the same one for all of you, and I'd like you to answer it in 60 short seconds. Let's see how you do. I'd like each of you to comment on a challenge facing our film, video, advertising, and multimedia industry, and how you envision overcoming that challenge. And I'd also like you to give us a quick peek at the year 2000 as we enter into the 21st century. What do you predict for Oregon's industry then? Ladies first, let's start with Chris.
Well, the challenge for us as an agency, I think, is to get to know our clients better and what their needs are, and to educate our clients to the fact that we have extremely talented people who now live in Oregon, and they don't have to go to a larger city to get what they need.
Okay, good. How about the year 2000? You've still got 15 seconds.
Unusual for me to say 15 seconds. I see us growing a lot in the film and television. I spoke to Peter Dunn last week. He's in Florida doing a spelling. He's producing something for spelling, and he wants to come back and live in Portland in the worst way, and he will bring at least one more episodic with him.
Good.
And that'll probably be before the year 2000, but
Close enough. Yeah. Good. While I'm reminded, there's a wonderful testimonial from Peter Dunn on the back table there that I hope you'll each take a copy of when you go, and also take a look at the architectural rendering of Chambers Communications Soundstage, and to take a look at the other material there. But moving on to Bob, please.
Well, I think our challenge and the direction we're going to head in is growth. I see this industry continuing to change very rapidly, although most industries nowadays are. The emphasis within our industry should be on multimedia and communications. We are in the largest communications explosion in the history of the United States right now. Someday, maybe not by the year 2000, but certainly someday, information is going to be sent by optics, cable, and satellite. Well, that information is going to include film, I believe. Someday a theater may get a film broadcast to it on satellite. It'll receive it on a video dish, and it will transmit it onto a large screen using lasers. That day will come. I don't know when it'll come, but I know that it will come eventually. The medium's origination, though, and that is the film itself, will be on film, and I think that Oregon can contribute heavily to the production of that film. The need for broadcast material is growing exponentially with the amount of cable stations available to it. The call for original material is at an all-time high, and once again, I think the challenge facing Oregon is to meet part of that demand.
Good. Thanks, Bob. David, please.
The answer is yes. Well, a couple things and observations. As far as the challenges, I mean, as it relates to the Oregon Film and Video Office, one is that we go into every 18 months into the legislature to try to continue to receive some funding. One question becomes, why doesn't the private sector do this? And part of the problem is, one, the competition. Again, with 240 film commissions that are government-sponsored, our trade association, Association of Film Commissioners International, require its members to be a government-sponsored entity to provide services without fee to its clients. The sheer competition, I cannot send Warner Brothers a bill for $18,000 for staff time when we were trying to hustle in production. From their point of view, is that they are being so bombarded to be brought to other jurisdictions, saying that, we're thinking of bringing, a $60 million movie to Oregon, and you want to send me a bill for trying to introduce this to your state. So that's one of the things that's really continuing, I think, a challenge as it relates specifically to the office, is to maintain what is a $450,000 a year investment to make sure that the industry grows. I think I echo the issue of multimedia. We didn't really ever define it. A feature film, by definition, is multimedia. It has a picture and it has sound. But I think what we're really talking about is sort of this combination of your telephone, your computer, and your television. It is broader than entertainment. While you will have interactive games, by the way, which is a bigger business domestically than the theatrical film business right now. There's more money being made, of people with interactive games than there is going through the turnstiles. But it's much broader than that, and I don't think Bob was really overstating it in terms of that this is the digital revolution that's going on. It is going to affect the way that we work, the way that we play, the way that we learn. And I think that Oregon is very well positioned because of the technology companies that are here, the software companies that are here, but I think critically is because of some of the creative and production companies that are here. And on a public policy level, I think at times we spend too much time focusing on the infrastructure, which is very important in terms of fiber optic cable, et cetera, and the technology. But I think Oregon's real opportunity is creating the copyrights and intellectual property that is using the infrastructure, because ultimately it is simply a tool. And so I think that as we focus more on beyond entertainment as it relates to teleeducation, electronic commerce, telemedicine, a lot of areas beyond just delivery of entertainment, there is a terrific opportunity for Oregon in the area of new media. And the areas of recruiting Hollywood, I think that will continue to be a very good business for Oregon. We will have some strong years, we will have some off years, but overall it is a very worthy investment for the state to be involved in. Also, I see continued growth of Oregon's own more traditional film and television industries, maybe not on the big screen, but when you do look at areas such as transactional television, things like TIE, the infomercial area, it's big business. And so I think that that Oregon's future is going to be very diverse in what is media, but I think, again, it could be quite strong.
Very good. And finally, Matthew, 60 seconds.
60 seconds. Okay. I think that taking off something Bob said is that I think one of the challenges which has faced the state is the lack of a large soundstage facility, which I think Chambers is stepping up to fill in that we'll have two 14,000 square foot sound stages available. And it is easier to get between Eugene and Portland than it often is between central Los Angeles and Malibu. Believe me, I know it. I used to live there. So we're bringing a resource to the state, and I think that one of the challenges that we're all going to be facing, and I think this picks off on what David and Bob have said, is that, in Chris, is that content is king. And what I think for the year 2000 is that you'll begin to see what is already a very strong indigenous industry here in Oregon in terms of creating content. And I think the method of distribution of content is going to be changing dramatically. I just came back from Tokyo, and they're now selling widescreen television sets, which on one half of them are traditional television, the other half is an internet interconnection, so that you can do the internet and television at the same time. And they're just out there on the billboards right now. The methods of distribution are going to be continually evolving and changing. What's going to be important is the creation of content, and content will be created in the minds and hearts of artists who live here in Oregon and in the Pacific Northwest, and hopefully will be created in facilities such as ours. But I feel very strongly that this is going to be a growth industry for Oregon.
Good. Thanks very much, and thanks to all of you. Before we move into our Q&A session, I just want to close my portion by letting you know about a wonderful event here in Portland that I consider the heart of our film, television, advertising, and multimedia community, and it's the Portland Creative Conference. It's 3 days of celebrating the finest in creativity in these mediums, and we hear from the best in the business from folks all around the world. It's an event unlike any other you'll ever attend anywhere in the world, and it's right here in our own fair city. So give the Portland Creative Conference a call if you'd like to find out more. At this point, I'd like to open it up to your board member for questions. And thank you very, very much.
Greg McPherson, City Club member. I have a question for David Woolson. New industrial facilities regularly seek and sometimes receive public subsidies in the form of property tax deferrals and the building of infrastructure as an incentive to locate in Oregon. You mentioned the expenditures by your office. Do these take the form of public subsidies to lure film and video production to the state? And then a second piece of the question is, would you favor public subsidies to build the large soundstage that Bob described as needed?
Kind of depends how we define subsidy. As it relates to our operating budget, I really don't see it so much of a subsidy as it is an investment in the state, based on, again, the role that the film office plays. It is a recognized entity and role within the film and video television industry. So there is this expectation that if I am a producer in Hollywood or New York or Tokyo, and I'm thinking of coming to Oregon, that there would be a state-level film commissioner, film office that I could interface with. So, I mean, in terms of, I see it more of as an investment than subsidy. As it relates to the issue of soundstage, one of the issues as far as public subsidy or involvement in that is that the soundstage business is a very tough one. Matt has mentioned some of the things going on with Chambers Communications. I think one of the things that makes it work for that particular company is that they are a more comprehensive media-related industry involving broadcast with its KZI properties, et cetera. As it relates to, but if you're purely just building stages, when you do the math, because there has been attempts made previously in the metro area, it is very difficult to make the case. Our view of that, to the extent in the metro area, would be almost, it is more like a convention center. In terms of as an investment in a infrastructure that helps attract production that I think can ultimately operate on a modest or moderate profit, but not enough to encourage venture capital to the project or to be able to receive conventional financing.
I'm Greg Jackson, City Club board member and also chair of the program committee. Thanks so much, Mary, for putting this program together today. You had mentioned the highly competitive nature of the film industry. When you are doing work in the film industry and trying to land a project here for any of you, what are the factors, both pro and con, that would help make that decision?
Greg, was that a question directed to David Woolson? Okay, for the panel.
Let me take the first part of it anyway, is that money, it's a business. I mean, you know, is it a cost-effective place to come shoot? Again, with large feature films, maybe it's a bit less of an issue. But again, Hollywood produces 140 or 150 of those for the 7 major studios. Half of those will stay in Los Angeles because they have no reason to leave. The other half, it is purely based on location and the look. But for virtually all television movies, lower budget features, can we make a good movie, but can we do it for a price? That's very important. What's the availability of crew and infrastructure and local actors and just all the support services? Because it comes back to money. If I can hire crew locally, it's one less person I have to house and feed and bring and fly here. A permit structure, am I hit with fees every time I turn around? What's the overall cooperation level of the community, of local government, of the Film Commission? And I guess one of the things that, of course, Oregon has that I feel that is unparalleled anywhere else in the United States is the locations. Literally from the deserts to the sea, from urban to rural. It makes my job very easy when we can literally pull out this world of locations. One of the things I didn't mention is that with the materials I have on the back, we produce a location brochure really highlighting the fact that it's a world of locations, from Europe to the Rockies, you know, to the deserts, etc. And so those are all very key factors.
Jay Gerard, City Club member. I think you're preaching pretty much to an audience of true believers. What can we do? What would you have us do? Is there a letter writing campaign for your individual cause celebs? How can we help?
I think we can open that up. I'd like Bob to take that.
I think one of the strongest things that we can do, and I know I've said this before, is to support David Woolson's efforts. His ROI is very impressive, but what he provides for the state through the film office is almost a production capacity. He organizes, he is a conduit for bringing in the films, for assisting with the permitting process, for helping them find the locations, for everything from the day they show up to the day they leave. He is a conduit. Everything flows through him. And right now, although he may not like me saying this, he's going through some budget processing, and anybody that wants to call their legislation person and legislator and throw support at the film office, I think it would be greatly appreciated, because I think that can continue to do the entire industry a strong service.
You can have the rest of my salad, Bob.
Okay. Do I get the $100 an hour later?
I've got a written question from the floor, and that is, Chris, you mentioned that most of the people who are take advantage of the services of your agency work part-time. In your view, are there complementary careers which ought to be encouraged that are most compatible with acting in the film industry?
Yes, we represent a lot of on-camera and voiceover people who work in the marketplace and that also do productions, non-broadcast things, will work in film and television. There are a lot of theater actors who work here who never before had an agent, nor did they work in film and television, and now they also do that. Some bankers have hidden talents. I mean, it just depends. It can be, or it doesn't have to necessarily be, something that you don't have to be. A voiceover talent isn't necessarily a DJ.
Good. Question from the audience.
Frances Stores, City Club member. What is the competition in this business like in Washington and British Columbia? What are our competitors doing?
I think David would be a fine one to take that on.
Well, it is, I guess the global view, again, as I mentioned earlier, it is truly an international competition. Out of the 240 film commissions that are members of the Association of Film Commissioners International, it is all 50 states, all provinces of Canada, Scotland, France, Asia, Central America, South America. I mean, it's truly global competition. Specifically in the West or greater, Pacific Northwest, Vancouver and British Columbia have been a very significant competitor over the last 5 to 8 years. A couple of reasons. One, 8 years ago there was a public investment in sound stages in that area, which began a catalyst for the business. One of the things in more recent years that we have struggled with in terms of competition has been the exchange rate. The fact is that 10 days ago I looked in the Wall Street Journal, the Canadian exchange rate was about 74 cents. Now, that's the bad news. The point we try to make to producers is that you don't get to keep the 26 cents. As soon as you arrive in Vancouver, it is a much more expensive city, having been up there a few weeks ago. I think that there is some international issues in terms of crossing a border. They've done a lot of things right. I'm not trying to badmouth them. I think they've done a lot of things right. The British Columbia government recognized that this is a business that they want to invest in, and they put their money where their mouth is, and they've reaped big dividends. They have been averaging $300 to $400 million a year in direct dollars in British Columbia. And so it is a significant competitor. And until I figure out what to do about the exchange rate, I'm not sure. But in terms of the West, I would say that outside of California, because of Hollywood and the base of the industry there, and I think the rest of the United States, is that I would consider that Oregon is in the top 10 or 15 in terms of locations that people shoot, which I'm not satisfied with, but I think that we're getting there.
And I think to give you an example of the reason why competition is so fierce, take a look at these numbers and do the math. And David, I know you'll correct me if I'm off base. When the Richard Donner production Assassins was here in town a couple of, year and a half ago or so now, maybe 2 years ago, with Assassins, that production came to town. I cannot now remember the dollars they left behind. I do remember that they had to leave here and go up to Seattle to finish filming up there. They spent $12 million more in Seattle that they would have left here had we had a soundstage, which would have cost us, by the way, at that time, about $12 million to build. So that would have been an initial solid investment. Am I very far off, David?
No, that's accurate. Is that we've had a very good relationship with Richard Donner, who is the director who did Maverick. His wife did the 2 Free Willy pictures here, and they enjoy Oregon. His main line producer actually went to the U of O, and so we have a very good relationship with the company. But yeah, it is true in terms of that there was significant loss because of the lack of stage on that, and it's one of those things that where. One key point I want to make you clear on is that there are some very good sound stages currently in Portland. But they are very good for commercial work. They're about 5,000, 6,000 square feet that are very professionally managed and run, and extremely good facilities. The issue becomes when you get into more feature film or series television, oftentimes you get into the scale of a 15 to 20,000 square foot at a minimum in terms of what they're needing, with clear span ceilings, meaning no posts, up to a 35, 40, 45 foot ceiling height. So I just want to be clear that there is existing sound stages, but not at the size that we're needing to attract that piece of the business.
Good, thank you.
I also think one thing that's going on right now is that because the velocity of production globally is increasing so much, there is an opportunity for the state of Oregon, because I know that in Vancouver there's a tightness of sound stages. Bob gave me an article yesterday which indicated that Los Angeles is beginning to experience a crunch. There are opportunities for the state of Oregon right now, which would be great for us to capitalize on, because the velocity of production globally is increasing because of the digital revolution.
Thanks, Matthew.
This will have to be the last question.
Alan Oliver, City Club member. We just finished with the political campaigns, and the listener and viewer was assaulted with what seemed thousands of hours of media related to them. Yet I didn't hear anyone mention that. Is it an embarrassment to the industry, or is it really not a very large part of the industry?
Just quickly, from a talent perspective, I worked like crazy during the campaigns, and I know that many of talent at all of the agencies here in town did. So, Chris, why don't you answer that?
Well, you basically answered it. Probably we did a lot of business during the campaigns and loved it. And people in our business are professional. They, on the most part, they do the job. They don't have to necessarily be Democrat or Republican or believe in the project. They go in, do their work, get out.
And to add to
great.
that, this impacts businesses such as Bob Lancaster's, such as Chambers Communication, where the pre- and post-production take place. It also impacts businesses like Hollywood Grip and Lighting, Vaughn Communications, who's here today, among others. And so this, the elections, I'm glad you brought that up, has a very significant impact on our industry and an immediate impact.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you, panel, for giving us a front row seat in your various theaters of operation. I think from the level of interest of the audience, you can count on the fact that you've got, if nothing else, a pool of ready extras here. So give us a call. And please remember that we're taking a Thanksgiving break next week. We'll see you 2 weeks from today back here with Julie Mancini on December 6th. Thank you. Have a happy holiday. We're adjourned. Okay.